picture our next guest here in Author's Corner in our virtual green room, sitting in some really cool place in Vermont. What's interesting is where we're going to take you, and that would be Oklahoma. The Okie Chronicles poems by Pamela Harrison, that's the name of the book, and such a delight. I talked to her off the air, and I just couldn't get it out of my head, the really beautiful area where she is, and then also the portrait she painted for me about Oklahoma, growing up, family members, that kind of thing. So it's a pleasure to welcome her to Author's Corner. Pamela, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Kate. Thank you for having me.
So let's talk about family life in the 50s in being let's call it an Okie. What was that like?
Well, it was a very proud place. I mean, we were sort of, as I say in a poem, on the border of South and West. So we had this very nice mingled culture of farming and oil wells, and we had a very fine football team, and that was very important. and I had the great honor and pleasure of going to a wonderful high school and had a wonderful teacher named Dear Mrs. Tuck. She's no longer with us. And she recognized something about me and poetry and encouraged me, and that's how my path began.
How tough, though, was life in Oklahoma? Because you think about, 2 decades before that, it was the Dust Bowl, and we know about the Dust Bowl. I remember studying it in history class, and I grew up outside of Philly, so it was so foreign to me. I thought, oh, these people, this is horrible, this is so hard, and I couldn't relate to it. But with all the detail and the imagery and everything else, which you capture, by the way, in your book, in these poems, what was life like for the people then and then decades later?
Well, I experienced it really through the experience of my mother, who was really a true Okie. She and her family were farmers to the east of Oklahoma City, and but their farm blew away in the Dust Bowl, and the whole family entered the caravans that were driving west to California, and they made it to the Central Valley, and then they all exited, the road at that point, and they all became field hands. They picked crops, they picked vegetables and fruit and everything, and they were there for several years trying to get their lives back in order. It was a family of 7 children. My mother was one of 3 girls, and the rest were boys, and 2 of the boys actually stayed in Oakland, California, and didn't come back to Oklahoma. But the rest of the family did come back, and when I first saw my grandmother and grandfather, it was usually for Sunday supper. We would drive from Oklahoma City, where we lived. My father was a family practitioner in Oklahoma City, and we would drive out to Sparks, Oklahoma, where my grandparents lived. And boy, I had not been on a really simple farm before, so that became a very vivid memory for me. Fortunately, part of the reason that I write poetry instead of tell stories is that I think if you're a storyteller, you really have to master dialogue, because dialogue propels the plot in many ways. But if you're like me, you have a visual memory, then you are busy sort of likening things to metaphors and things like that. And boy, did their farm hit me. They had a swayback horse. The soil was had basically blown away. I heard somewhere that at one time the dust clouds were hundreds of feet high during the Dust Bowl, hundreds of feet high into the air, and came rolling over the plains. And actually, at one point, the Congress of the United States in Washington, D.C. had its windows open to debate some things for, procedures for the Dust Bowl, and the Dust Bowl blew in. And if you can imagine something of that power. And so I had some visual memories of the simplicity of their lives, and I also knew the kind of hardships that they had endured, and I knew the character of my mother, who was one of the most intelligent and caring but silent women. I think she only got a high school education and then waited tables for 2 years. She knew how to read. Her father taught her how to read on his lap, read the newspaper, and they took her to school when she was 5, and they put her in the second grade because she was so far ahead. And but she graduated high school at the age of 16, and then she wanted to be a nurse, like her mother, like her older sister May had been a naval nurse during the war, but she had to go wait tables to earn enough money to get to go to nursing school. And then when she became a nurse, she was such a good nurse. She was a surgical nurse in the OR, and that's how my father met her, because his family was disrupted by the Depression because his father, who had been a banker, established the first bank in Cortez, Colorado. His bank was closed to keep people in Chicago from jumping off of ledges, and things like that. That's the family story I heard anyway. And so we spent some time as children out there as well, in Cortez and the Four Corners. So I got to see the West. I got to see people working hard every day, and I was so struck by their integrity. And it bothered me that all the movies I saw, somehow the poor people were always poorly spoken and mean-spirited and kind of ruined by their failure and their hardships. But what I knew of these people was that they were extraordinarily kind and honest and hardworking. So that was where a lot of the impulse to write came from. Also, I had this whole bunch of good stories saved up. The kids in the book have an uncanny resemblance to me and my brother and sister, and I just had my father was a storyteller. We sat around the dinner table all the time and told whatever was interesting about our daily lives, and so storytelling was sort of central to it all, and that's where I got the habit, and then it was just a matter of recalling all of these wonderful things to give color to what I was writing.
Well, that sums it up, that's for sure. What do you hope people take away from the Okie Chronicles?
Well, I hope that they, too, might understand that we're in a situation now where so many of our farmers are having to sell their farms because corporate interests have taken over, and it's very hard for them to certainly this is the case in Vermont. Vermont has a farming or had a farming culture, but we've been losing our family farms here so much because it's hard work, and the price of milk has gone down, and so on and so on. So I wanted to pay tribute to them and tell the story of these hardworking souls of the earth that are the basic character of America was settled by people who were working the land. So
yeah,
that's what I
absolutely
wanted to do. Yeah.
And you do that, Okie Chronicles. All right, we only have like a minute and something left, but give me one of the lines from the Chronicles.
Oh well, I think I would like to just read the prologue.
Do it,
if you don't mind, because it's such a land-based. It's such the story grows right out of the land, and it tells the story of the land. Borderland, it's called, where the rumple of the Ozarks smooths to the prairie plain, on the border of south and west, mockingbirds call down the chimney at dawn. The sun's engine rumbles up the curve, glare and heat rush over the flats faster than jackrabbits routed by fire, caught the tops of the cottonwood trees, then the fragrant Osage orange, soon all the long grass. A dry blast of light blazes the way to dusk. The western rim unfurls red banners for the just spent day, and the purple earth dissolves before the long roll of night. Between these poles stretches a windy space, on whose horizon, between soil and sky, men and women bend, scratching shallow names in the plain. No wonder they don't say much, and when they do, it's for the story they ply against the emptiness that laps on every side. That he is able, a man takes with him like a totem to the fields. At midday, sun falls straight on his shoulders, and he stands on the sill of his own shadow, sufficient as it might prove.
Wow. So well done.
Beginning.
Yeah. So well done. Yes, I love it. You set it up. Pamela Harrison, the book is called Okie Chronicles. Pick it up and you will know exactly what it's like, life in Oklahoma. And as Pamela said, there's so much more to it.
I just want to say that I just got word today that my new book is going to come out in July 2021. It's called Whirligig. I just got it. I got goosebumps when I realized I read it just about 10 minutes before we started talking.
Nice. So we'll look for that too, but go to Amazon and pick this one up. Okie Chronicles. Pamela Harrison, thanks so much.
Thank you, Kate.